like my transition, cause it's fucking brilliant. La da 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 da. Alright, hello and welcome everyone. It's yours truly, Gotchaholic. Now, considering this is part 2 to my arc analysis video, pretty much cut the intros and get right back into it from where we left off. I'm just gonna brush upon a few things real quick. For one, there's a previous video, my part 1. You pretty much need to watch my Shion video before watching this one, so if you haven't, stop watching this, go watch that. I also have a preparation video for Arc 2. It's semi-optional, but I still recommend watching that as well. I know, it's a lot of content, sorry. And last thing, I'm going to quickly summarize what we've learned from Part 1, just to kind of recap on it. Basically, in a nutshell, I've been juggling 2 theories for how this arc plays out. So either A, Satoko accidentally injected Mion with the syndrome in episode 5 while Mion was pretending to be Shion. This is because Rika convinced Keiichi to give the doll to Mion, therefore she's not going to vent to Shion and make Shion paranoid, and then Shion won't hit L5 and rampage. So Satoko's thinking, I'm gonna inject Shion with the syndrome so that she still fucking rampages. And the reason this makes sense is because then if Mion was the one that killed Rika, Satoko wouldn't necessarily be expecting this, and this plays into why she has to go confront Mion at the end of episode 8 to confirm that Rika's actually dead before she resets. I will explain a lot of this in greater detail as the scenes come up, but that's basically option A, and honestly, the only reason I consider this a possibility is simply because it's a generally safe assumption. However, as I've alluded to in part 1, I actually don't think Satoko injected Mion with the syndrome until after Rika died, because clearly no one knew that Rika was dead yet except who killed her, and then that would explain why Mion didn't show symptoms of the syndrome, until the latter scene, which was after Rika died. And the reason that this theory makes more sense to me is because at the beginning of episode 8, Rika is suddenly unaccounted for. Well, this clearly freaks Satoko the fuck out because she needs Rika to die before her so she can get Rika into the next fragment, timeline, whatever. So she injects Mion right then and there, and she even gets Mion to specifically target Rika, hence the point of injecting Mion with the syndrome so hastily in the first place. And remember, Mion is the first culprit we see babble nonsense about Rika. Now, as I've alluded to in my preparation video, this actually makes a lot of sense because Ren is basically a pseudo-looper, so there's no way Satoko is going to be able to control Rena as a culprit like she would her other culprits. So, writing off the second theory, this also explains Satoko and Shion's dynamic in the earlier episodes of Arc 2. In part 1, we discuss how Satoko and Shion are like best fucking friends, and at first glance, this makes no sense. Well, considering that Satoko viewed all of Rika's past fragments, she definitely saw herself being tortured by Shion, and so Satoko understands exactly how Shion feels about her. And Satoko could easily reverse this. She could just tell Shion, "Oh, Satoshi told me all these lovely things about you." The only question this second theory leaves is, well, who killed Rika? Now, as we continue our Arc 2 analysis, I got one last thing to say in regards to who killed Rika. If you're familiar with my channel, you don't gotta think too hard about who I'm suspecting. It's likely someone we've been ignoring this entire fucking analysis. So, continuing where we left off in part 1, we're at the beginning of episode 7. We're still at the festival, and Rika already suspects that Keiichi broke into the haunted tool shed with Shion. Rika is definitely still worried about Shion, because even though Rika knows that Mion didn't vent to Shion about Keiichi, another major element that spiked Shion's syndrome was her dynamic with her family. Basically, Rika is worried about the consequences Shion might face for taking Keiichi into the shrine. Hence, Rika's emphasis on making sure that Keiichi actually watched her dance, in other words, that he didn't break into the haunted tool shed with Shion, which, yeah, he did, so Rika's already like, fuck! And also, Rena has no idea what's going on, and she's not up to anything whatsoever. So, continuing, our boy Keiichi runs into Oishi upon returning home from the festival, and our MVP detective is pretty much like, "Yo, you ain't seen the Sonozakis up to no good, have you? You ain't seen no murders or disappearances, have you? You ain't been where you ain't supposed to be, have you?" And then Keiichi's like, Nah, man, I have no idea what you're talking about. So yeah, Keiichi then returns home, and Mion calls him pretending to be Shion. This is when Mion figures out that Shion took Keiichi into the haunted tool shed. Alright, not gonna lie, this is where things get really frustrating, because I lose track of Shion. And God, my frustration's manifesting in real life because this fucking bird won't shut up. So, like, the in-story exposition reveals that Shion went missing on the night of the festival, and this is somewhat backed up because we never see Shion after. And I believe it was that phone conversation Mion had with Keiichi when she learned that Shion took him into the haunted tool shed that really justified Mion killing Shion when that moment came around. The final nail in the coffin, so to say. But clearly, Mion would not kill Shion unless she was induced by the syndrome. There's just no way Mion would kill Shion of her own volition. However, if Shion really did go missing on the night of the festival, then that means either A, Mion killed her before this phone conversation, which definitely implies that Satoko injected her with the syndrome in episode 5, or B, someone else killed Shion on the night of the festival. And I swear to God, like, if Rena killed Shion, and I'm wrong about this, I'm gonna be fucking mad. Or C, going with the possibility that Satoko didn't inject Mion until after Rika went missing, then perhaps Mion locked Shion up and didn't kill her until later. And last thing that makes this more confusing. See, I don't think Mion nor Shion went on that rampage, meaning I don't think either of them killed, like, the mayor or any of the members of the Great Families. Considering Shion went missing on the night of the festival, I don't see how it could have been her. And if Mion went on that rampage, then it's because Satoko planned for it to happen, so she would have intentionally injected Mion with the syndrome and somehow facilitated that event. But if that were the case, then later in episode 8, when Rika goes missing, Satoko should have known right away that it's because Mion killed her, and then Satoko would have reset right away. But she didn't, which tells me that Satoko had no idea what happened to Rika. Think about it. How would Satoko inflict Mion with the syndrome and set her up for a killing spree, and then later be surprised that Rika goes missing, not knowing that it's her own culprit? That literally makes no sense. So, again, I brought this up because I don't think Mion nor Shion went on that rampage, because either way, it really doesn't make any sense. Now, I got a little ahead of myself, but I'm just emphasizing how losing track of Shion really complicates putting the rest of this arc together. Alright, so continuing after Mion and Keiichi's phone conversation. So, the next day, Keiichi meets up with Rena. So yeah, Rena has no idea what's going on, she isn't up to anything whatsoever, she ain't make no deals with Satoko or nothing. It's worth noting that Keiichi thinks he's cursed by Oyashiro for some reason, probably because he broke into that haunted tool shed. Anyways, Rena and Keiichi meet up with Mion. We are definitely going to cover Mion and her backstory, but at the end of episode 8. I know I did Shion's analytics much sooner in part 1, however, it makes a lot more sense to cover Mion when she's featured at the end of episode 8, so I will say her behavior throughout the beginning of this episode, which is episode 7, definitely suggests to me that she does not have the syndrome yet, though honestly, I don't ever recall seeing Mion have the syndrome before, so I don't really have a reference point. But I don't know, I could be wrong. Like I said, it's very possible that Satoko injected Mion at the beginning of episode 5. So our cast go to school like usual, and this is where Chisei reveals to everyone that the mayor is missing. Which is actually fucking crazy. Whoever killed the mayor, I don't know how they pulled it off. The next major event is when Rika talks to Keiichi, and he confesses to her that he broke into the haunted tool shed, and he's like, Rika, I think I'm gonna die. I don't know what happened to Shion. And Rika's like, you fucking dumbass. Of course, Satoko's there checking things out, and do note that Satoko witnesses Keiichi and Rika together, and this is actually the last time Satoko sees Rika. This will be important later, so keep that in the back of your mind for now. But ultimately, this concludes episode 7. Now, quick note, honestly, I have no idea, like, why the mayor was targeted. I mean, naturally, the first assumption is that Mion or Shion killed him. Given their great family, they would have the strongest dynamic with the mayor. However, pretty sure a bunch of other people die and around the same time. Like, pretty sure the grandma dies. Honestly, I forget, but like a bunch of people die. And if it wasn't who we've been purposefully ignoring this entire analysis, then my next guess would be Satoko. I briefly mentioned this in part 1, but Satoko could have gone on this killing spree simply because she's the most capable. Satoko can remake decisions, and she also has Takano's gun. So let's say Satoko intended to inject Shion with the syndrome, but now Shion's missing, then Satoko could just take things into her own hands. Honestly, I'm not really sure, but this brings us into the beginning of episode 8. This is when our cast and everyone else learns that Rika is missing. Literally the only person who knows where she is the person who fucking killed her. And the craziest thing about this is that Satoko just doesn't kill herself right away. Satoko has literally killed herself over flipping cards before in this exact same timeline. I mean, not like this exact loop, but a variant version of this timeline. Like, I promise you, if Satoko had anything to do with Rika dying, like if Satoko knew that Rika was dead right now, she would fucking kill herself. Remember later in the Satoko Hen arc, when Satoko's talking to Awa, she literally says, "Only the reality that I choose persists." This is why Satoko has no problem killing any of her friends off. Like, I promise you, if Satoko knew that Rika was dead right now, she would just fucking kill herself and get into the next fragment. But she doesn't. Instead, she starts suspecting Keiichi of all people, and honestly it's just because Keiichi was the last person she saw around Rika. Then Mion brings up that she saw Rika talking to a construction worker, which, okay, us Higurashi veterans know she's talking about the mountain puppies. Now, in regards to the mountain puppies, since we know Takano isn't evil anymore and she's not organizing them, the only reason they'd be active, like, in this arc is because the mayor and a bunch of members of the great families just got murked. But as we see in the later episodes of Go, they would be trying to help Rika, and clearly Rika's fucking dead, so they're not helping Rika. So honestly, I'm not really sure what they're doing. Either a character tipped them off, or they're just active, like I said, because a bunch of people just got murked. I really think the emphasis on the mountain puppies is just a red herring for a first-time view. Even us veterans might fall for this and think that Takano's up to something and that she's somehow involved, but not falling for it. So yeah, Keiichi and Mion start looking for Rika. Now, there is one moment that happens that kind of suggests that Mion could have killed Rika. So when Keiichi goes to check the septic where Rika's drowning, Mion stops him, but honestly, this could be coincidental. Alright, I'm gonna come out of the rabbit hole for a second, and so quick side note, the way they set up the homage to the original ladder scene is fucking silly. Mion is literally like, "Oh, I think I saw something on the roof." And fucking Keiichi gets on the ladder, goes on the roof, he's like, "Oh, Rika's not up here. Weird." I mean, God, what the fuck? Anyways, this is when Mion starts showing symptoms of the syndrome indefinitely. And I personally feel like if she had the syndrome throughout this arc, she would have been acting like this a lot more. Now, for me, it feels like Satoko just freshly injected Mion and is all like, "Mion, Rika is evil, Rika's bad, you have to kill her. Please, I don't know where she is and I need to kill her so I can safely get us into the next fragment." Or, you know, however the fuck Satoko's getting her culprits to target people. God, poor Keiichi. So, after Mion freaks the fuck out, Chisei interrupts her and Keiichi, and Mion plays this off like everything's totally normal, and Keiichi, being the pretty little wallflower he is, doesn't say anything. What a true representation of the reader. Well, I guess in this case, the viewer. And don't you worry your pretty little head off, we're about to get into Mion's character analytics very soon. Just gotta power through a few more scenes of this fucking hell arc. God, get me the fuck out of Arc 2 already. Continuing, Keiichi leaves the school with Mion and Rena. Now, at the beginning of part 1, I alluded to how I mixed scenes up in my preparation video. Just a quick correction for the 5 of you that noticed, I originally said the scene happened after Rena, foreshadowed the entire storyboard for Go, inner dialogue to Keiichi near the middle of episode 5. Well, clearly this scene does not happen in episode 5. However, I will bring up again, just like I brought up in my preparation video, this is the last time we see Rena in this loop. And it's kind of weird that Satoshi gets referenced and Rena does not freak the fuck out. And last thing, do note that it was Oishi and Rena who busted into the Sonozaki residence in the original. The next thing with this scene is that we see the mountain puppies again, but I'm pretty sure they're a red herring. And this scene finally ends with Keiichi getting a nice little pep talk from his friends, but he still feels horrible because he low-key knows that Rika and Shion are probably dead. I mean, Rika is dead for sure, and if Shion's not dead yet, she's about to be. Well, then Mion invites Keiichi over to her house. She's straight DTF, JK. Well, I mean, she is, so I guess I'm not JK. Mion ultimately locks up Keiichi to keep him as her plaything. Okay, for real though, it's because a lot of people just got murked and she's trying to protect him. And so, again, this is why Mion going on that rampage makes no sense, because then Mion would be locking Keiichi up to protect her from herself. Like, I haven't even had to bring up Rule Z yet, because it just fundamentally makes no sense. Likewise, Mion killing Rika also makes no sense. This is why in part 1 I kept saying how I don't think Mion killed anyone except Shion. And honestly, even that's kind of an assumption. Now, we definitely know this is Mion that we've been seeing in the second half of episode 8. You can tell by her dialogue to Keiichi, she just says a bunch of Mion shit, right? Considering we're almost at 20 minutes, I don't want to go too deep into explaining how we know that this is definitely Mion, so please just trust me. Or I can explain in the comment section, I don't know. But even though we're almost out of this fucking hell arc, now's a great time to talk about Mion Sonozaki as a character. So yes, prepare your mind for some character analytics. It's most befitting to start with Mion Sonozaki's most dynamic in-story trait, though the reason is pretty unorthodox. Ultimately, her mom married someone that the old hag didn't approve of. I forget her mom's name, but it's that green-haired chick that beheaded Rika during her 3rd consecutive death before the Satago Hen arc started. Referencing this show is just lovely. Ultimately, Oreo didn't approve of Mion's mother's marriage because I believe she married an outsider. And, well, the apple don't fall too far from the tree, because Mion is in love with Keiichi Maebara, whom is also an outsider. So, Mion was born as the original Shion, the younger sister. However, her and the original Mion swapped places, so now she goes by Mion and plays as the eldest. Though the Sonozaki sisters swapped identities while they were younger, this was before their mother married. In other words, Mion never planned on taking the head of family from Shion. Mion's honestly a very genuine person. Shion actually feels guilty over pushing what should have been her responsibilities onto Mion. They've actually talked about it before, and Mion holds no resentment towards Shion whatsoever. Because again, Mion is truly a genuine person. Mion shares a very innate bond with Shion, despite not really being able to spend that much time with her. Upon my first viewing of Higurashi, I found Mion's separation with her sister very mysterious and intriguing. I bet everyone's first question when first engaging Mion was, well, why does she go to school when her sister doesn't? Being the well-written characters that they are, piecing together these sisters' backstories is fundamentally rewarding. Whereas Shion, whom assumed the role of the younger sister, got sent to St. Lucia's boarding school, Mion was actually spared of this fate because she has to stay in Hinamizawa to upkeep her role as the head of the Sonozaki family. Mion isn't just placed into the story, she literally is where she is for a reason. Now, at first glance you might not think so, but considering Higurashi takes place in Japan and in the 80s, Mion is rather tomboyish. She really only acts feminine around Keiichi, which is a dead giveaway that she likes him. And what's crazy is how much her character quirks actually make sense. For example, her tomboyishness actually branches off from how serious and stern she has to be when dealing with the other two great families. And she's not just club leader because she's the oldest. She's the fucking heir to the Sonozaki family. Like, of course she's club leader, of course she wants to set a good example for the younger students. 'Cause eventually she'll be leading the village. Now, one of the more interesting things about Mion is that she actually possesses a pseudo-supernatural trait completely unique to her. In other words, Rule Z. Ultimately, Mion will never hit L5 through standard methods. At some point in the visual novel, Rika gives exposition to, I believe, Hanyu, noting that she's never seen Mion rampage or go crazy. Like, literally, Rika would have to die and cause the disaster, or Mion would have to be directly injected to hit L5. Alright, so last few things about Mion before we continue with our Arc 2 analysis. Although Mion truly has a heart of gold, this bitch ain't afraid to get her hands dirty. For example, when Rena kills Rina, Mion actually helps hide the body. Likewise, when Keiichi kills Teppei, Mion helps hide the body, which actually ends up confusing Keiichi, but, I mean, her intentions were good. But yeah, Mion's a good friend, and she will help you hide bodies, so... And last thing, pretty sure Mion has a freaky tattoo on her back. So, continuing with our Arc 2 analysis, I hope I satiated you Mion fans, because all I really did was prolong this fucking hell arc. Okay, I'm gonna try to breeze through the rest of this. Alright, back to when Mion locked Keiichi up as her plaything. She sees the mountain puppies on the camera, and we know Mion is not hallucinating this because Keiichi also sees them. Okay, then this next scene is actually fucking crazy because a staple character trait for Mion is that she never wields weapons, but she pulls out a fucking revolver. Mion, what happened to you? Alright, so a quick little side note to keep in the back of your mind. We never see that fucking revolver again. And I'm pretty sure I know who takes it. Someone who's busted into the Sonozaki residence before. Okay, real quick, I'm gonna explain why the mountain puppies are active. Cause a bunch of people got murked, and they're probably onto the fact that the syndrome's going around. I'm gonna drop a little theory real quick, okay? The murderer, who's been killing everyone, wants the mountain puppies to notice, so they can thwart the evil twerp who made a deal with them. So basically, the murderer purposefully targets the mayor and the members of the Sonozaki family, because everyone would notice right away, and it would also evade their own involvement, because it would seem like the Sonozaki sisters were actually murdering these people. So the murderer quickly draws attention to the evil brat antagonizing the story, and also conceals their own involvement at the same exact time. And also probably murked Rika. Well, anyways, getting the fuck out of this arc, so Keiichi breaks out of his imprisonment because he doesn't want to be Mion's plaything anymore. He gets rescued, and then he ultimately ends up talking to Oishi, and it's this moment that Oishi cryptically reveals Satoko and Mion's dead, Shion's dead, Rika's dead. Of course, Keiichi's like, what the fuck? What a perfect representation of the viewer. Well, in regards to the conclusion of this arc, I have one last observation. That there are two things missing. Shion's revolver, and the murderer. Okay, and I'm gonna comment on this scene real quick before we call it quits, but in terms of the choreography, I don't see how Satoko shot Mion and then herself and then have the gun centered between them like that. Literally makes no sense. I mean, that's probably what happened, but it just makes no sense. Well, yeah, it's been fun, everyone. Hope y'all enjoyed my Arc 2 analysis. It's fucking finally over. God, this arc's fucking crazy. A lot of crazy shit happened. There's a lot of speculation. I made a lot of wild guesses. Probably gonna be wrong about a lot of them, but hopefully I helped you fine-tune your own theories, because honestly, that's really what matters. Okay, I'm fucking over this arc, so I'm gonna roll the outro. Later. Bye-bye. Hope you have a good time. See you in long time. Oh, you like what I got, yeah? You fucking weeb.